Welcome to Patrick's Scale Studio. My name's Patrick. I'll be your host. This is build video 4 for USS Yorktown CV5 in 1/200 scale, along with the Pontos kit. Pontos kit, by the way, again, is for the CV6 Enterprise because nobody makes any aftermarket parts for her poor sister, Yorktown. That said, we'll move on and use what we can from that set. So in build video 3, pointed out that while I was waiting for plastic card to arrive so I can reshape the hull to a much more accurate shape, there was other things I could go out and look at doing. And mainly that involved getting these holes drilled out in these decks. And went looking further back in this instruction booklet for what these holes were going to be used for. I'll be more than happy to show you right now. Alright, so all of these little holes right here, they're asking you to drill right there on the main flight deck are for 20mm Oerlikon cannons. At the time period I'm modeling the ship, nobody on this ship knew what those looked like because they were never installed on this ship. Those came later on in a quick remodel here to get ready for war. So I don't need to drill those holes. Similarly, these holes right here, 2 more 20mm Oerlikons. These 3 holes right here are 3 50 caliber machine guns. 50 caliber machine guns with water jackets on them, because those were cooled by water jackets. I'm not drilling those out yet because I don't believe that's an accurate location for those, because after they added the Oerlikons, the 50s were all relocated to different spots on the ship. And that left us with these 2 great big holes here. And those 2 great big holes right there are for the quad 1.1 inch guns, anti-aircraft guns, and Yorktown has 4 of them in 1940, but they don't have gun tubs or with the splinter shields around them at that time. They are just sitting there on deck unprotected, and the holes they're asking you to drill right there are huge. And in fact, the one right here is right next to, let me actually get it for you. We hold this there. That hole right there that they're asking you to open up would open up into right next to this right here, where I'm not sure yet what this is for. I'm not yet sure about the wooden deck going on. So for now, I'm holding off on making those holes. But that didn't leave me with absolutely nothing to do. I went looking for some brass rod to replace the propeller shafts here that come with the kit. Those are located there, and these 2 right here, these are on the T2 sprue, parts 1921. So I went ahead and cut one of out just to have a look, just to see if it fit with the kit propellers and these shaft supports and everything like that, just to see how things fit. And I was really disturbed by the, I'm trying to get this to focus, the not round shape of these plastic propeller shafts. There is a significant step on each side, not to mention these fairly heavy sprue gates here for such a thin little piece. And in my experience, trying to get a round plastic part corrected here with sprue gates and mold seams and steps is near impossible with a 99.9% failure rate. So I'm going to go with brass rod. Got 3mm brass rod. It's going to take a while to get it down to the correct diameter, but should be able to chuck that into a drill and get that shaved down to the proper diameter of about 2.8mm. Now on top of that, the holes in these propellers, and these are from the Pontos set, are not the correct diameter, even for the kit part, it won't go in there. So in theory, were we to use this and that, I'd have to taper this down in order to be able to go in there. But again, I'm not using this, so we'll also have to taper down the brass that we're going to go ahead and semi-machine down to the correct outside diameter. And that brings up another interesting point here. I usually like to compare parts in an aftermarket set with parts that actually come in the kit to see what we're replacing and make sure that the juice is worth the squeeze. So you can see here, compare these two propellers. The bullet nose looks a little bit sharper on the Pontos part, but the shape of the blades is a lot more accurate. I'm going to put some pictures here up on the screen so you can have a look, but these definitely look the part. So you'll definitely be using these. Just probably going to have to get a pair of soft pliers so that I can hold this in place and drill that out to the correct diameter, or again taper the brass rod that I'm going to use down to the proper diameter to be able to fit into there. So that's where I'm at right now with that chunk. Oh, I actually love surprises. I was working on setting up the next segment for this current video, and lo and behold, some packages arrived on my doorstep a little bit earlier than anticipated. So right here, we just got done talking about the propeller shafts and how I was going to be doing those out of brass rod so I could have a perfectly round shape. I'll go ahead and have a look here at this. Just one of these is going to be long enough to accommodate 3 of the propeller shafts. So all I have to do really is kind of cut this into some approximate lengths with a little bit left over. Put it into the chuck of my electric drill, and then I will just spin this and sand it down, checking on it as we go. Just want to make sure that this is going to, one, be able to fit into the spots on the Yorktown hull, also that it's going to fit into the propeller support or propeller shaft supports, and then, you know, in the end we're going to have to trim it up a little bit on the very end so it'll fit inside one of these beautiful propellers. So this is great, and I'll be able to get to work on that pretty quickly. Put this back for now. And then, as you can see, I've got enough plastic here to make my own model kit. Got 5 packages of the 0.1 by quarter inch, or I'm sorry, 1/10 by quarter inch plastic strips, 1/8 inch by quarter inch plastic strips. Looks like 80. You know, almost, yeah, 2 millimeter sheet, 1.5 millimeter sheet, and I got 4 of these 1 millimeter thick sheet. And so most of this will be able to be used to go around the, you know, on the inside of the hull, where I'm going to be sanding on the bottom of the hull. This right here is going to be definitely most handy for inside the hull, where it's going to be going into curves and things like that, because I'll be able to put just a very slight angle on the edge of these so that they will butt right up against one another without any weird spacing issues or anything like that. So this is fantastic. I'll be able to get to work on that very soon as well. Another thing I can also do, and I probably start working on after I start getting some of that styrene glued to the hull of Yorktown, that's going to take some time to cure. So while that fully cures and goes off, and make sure that that is a solid plastic to plastic bond, and is welded together the way I want it to be welded together, is I can actually go ahead and start preparing some of these pieces for the Pontos set to go into place. One thing I do want to call out, I've been looking into other YouTube builds, and they're out there for Enterprise. Sadly, no one's really done anything with Yorktown that I've been able to find a lot of resources on. But the Pontos instructions for up front here call out this right here. And that was on Yorktown in 1942, or I'm sorry, that was on Enterprise in 1942. It is not on Yorktown in 1940 though. So while I'm cutting those two pieces off right there on the part that is going to cover that, there are two circles, and those right there are mainly just so that piece can go in place. I'm not going to put that piece in place. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can really do about those circles on there right now without really messing up a lot of this beautiful detail. So when we go and put the paint down, we're just kind of overlook that and probably try to avoid adding any kind of wash or details or anything like that to those two areas. Maybe I'll just cover them up with some ropes, because I do actually have some pictures of Yorktown with piles of ropes around various areas here. So that's one thing I wanted to call out real quick in those instructions. And then the other thing is, like I said, I was watching a bunch of other people work on Enterprise, and the Pontos instructions here on this piece here show what all you're supposed to be cutting off. Let me get this a little bit closer. Hopefully there's no glare right there, but you can see it right there. And what it's indicating is these little pieces right here, here, and here need to get cut off as well. However, if you do that and go according to the Pontos instructions, you will be left with no detail to fill those holes on this aft deck piece. So leave those there. If you're going to be following along or building this down the road, absolutely leave those pieces on, because this is designed so that that will fall right over top of those molded in parts. But like I said, I can go ahead and at least start getting some of this stuff shaved off of here, cleaned up and ready to put this stuff down. So that'll be really nice to be able to do after I start getting some of that plastic sheet applied to the hull. Okay, every large journey has some very humble beginnings, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my humble beginning on this. I'm going to start here at the bow, and I believe this is actually called the stem right here. And this is going to have to come back a little bit, but just not 100% sure yet how far back. But I definitely want to build up the height. And so what I've done was, out of this strip right here, which I believe is 1/10 an inch by 1/4 inch. I've cut a little piece off of it, and I've kind of shaped it so I can fit it on there in place. And it looks like it just needs a little bit of adjustment, but from that we'll be able to build up a little bit more up front. And in addition, we'll be building up some here on the side as well. And we will just continue going on here until we can get to a spot further down where it makes sense to put down larger pieces from the actual styrene sheets. So we'll go ahead here and find exactly where we're going to put this in place. And I'd like to stress again that this is only what I see when I'm looking at the plans. There has been a little bit of, there's a lot of folks that believe that the hull is just fine as is, or it doesn't need modification, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'm not trying to cause any ruckus or anything like that. Again, I'm building my model as I see fit. And certainly if I ever decide to take on USS Yorktown CV5, and feel like this is not something that you wish to do, then don't do it. As modelers, unless we are building something commissioned, oftentimes we forget that in the end, it's us who has to enjoy the finished product, not somebody else. And even if somebody else does enjoy the finished product, eventually they're going to go home. Alright, so I'm going to get this centered up a little bit more. There we go. The nice thing about this extra thin is it allows a little bit of playtime. And if you saw my hat, apologies. I will turn it around. Alright, so it's not 100% tight, but another part of this will be adding what they call sprue goo, where eventually I'm going to take bits of styrene and melt it down into a thick gloppy paste, which I can fill in cracks and crevices. But the main goal here is just to start getting some of this height built up. As you can see, all the ink from the Sharpie marker I used to mark the center line is starting to dissolve with the glue, and that's okay. With the cement, I guess. Okay. So with that, we've taken our first humble step in this long journey toward getting this hole to where I envision it. Alright, so I've got a couple of pieces here, and I'll let you know in advance. I'm not going to put down video segments for every piece of this hole that I'm going to be attached, and otherwise this would take hours and hours and hours of your time of boring, and I mean incredibly boring, work. But just to kind of show a bit what I'm doing, how I'm going about it. The one really rewarding facet of doing this is it's kind of freeing, actually. I'm able to kind of go and do as I see fit on this. Because in the end, all of this can eventually get sanded out. Go ahead and as you can imagine, moving this thing around to accommodate a camera is not the easiest job in the world. There we go. So once they get stuck on there, and we can so our next step here at this very beginning is going to be getting some sprue goo to kind of get all that, better molded in, kind of fill in these cracks there with plastic that will eventually harden up. After we do that, then we'll do another section here. And we'll just continue chunking it out little by little But for right now, that's where we're at with this. So I come back with some sprue goo. And I just realized, maybe not everyone knows what sprue goo is. So for the uninitiated, sprue goo is simply dissolved plastic, dissolved styrene, to be precise. And pretty much take sometimes leftover bottles of extra thin where it's getting to the point where you almost can't make contact with the cement, or it's dirty and cloudy, and you just start cutting up styrene and dropping it in. There's no exact formula for this. You don't have to have precise cuts, precise measurements. You start off with a little bit at a time. And got some styrene here, and I usually get stuff like this out of a evergreen odds and ends bag. There we go. Let's get you tightened back up. But yeah, basically all you got to do is just chunk up some plastic. Like this. And just start dropping the pieces in. And as a rule of thumb for me, I generally like to ensure I've got, besides one more bottle of extra thin, one past that. Inevitably, spills happen, or not paying attention, and you might be running low on the one that you're actually using for cement. So I have plenty. Now, I have heard some debate on using either evergreen styrene for this, or just using chopped up bits of model sprue, as the slang term sprue goo suggests. I've heard that there are inconsistencies in the, or maybe impurities is a better word, in the sprue of the model kits. Generally speaking, I tend to make it and apply it from the kit that I'm actually modeling, because then you've got matching plastic. I've never had any problem using chopped up bits of sprue. In this case though, since I've got just a lot of evergreen, go ahead and apply it to this purpose. And I'm using evergreen styrene anyway to bulk out this ship, so seems like a natural choice. But yeah, all we're doing is just dropping these in there. The smaller the bits, the quicker it dissolves in the glue or the cement. Yeah, in this case, the term sprue goo doesn't really apply since I'm not using sprue. But here we go. I don't like mine to be too thick, especially in this case, as I'm going to need it to flow into some recesses. But that's a good starting point. Just get it in there. Let the plastic do its work, or the cement do its work on the plastic. And you can see it's already starting to turn white, where the styrene is dissolving in it. But I'll probably let that sit for several hours or overnight, and then start adding more as needed. And then we'll be able to start filling in all these tiny little crevices in here so that we've got a good solid hunk of plastic on this right here. I don't want to start sanding and come across these great big voids and recesses, because if you do, that will start to affect the integrity of everything that we're putting on there. So let's go ahead and continue shaking, and we'll be back when that's done. Okay, back with some the sprue goo, which again is just dissolved styrene. Give it a good shake. And I kind of like mine more in a consistency of like Elmer's white PVA glue, school glue, that kind of stuff. Now, I've got a couple of channels that run between this piece and this piece. Same thing on the other side. Just teeny tiny little channels right there at where the pieces meet the kit hole. And so what I'm going to end up doing is first running some regular Tamiya extra thin down there. And what that should do is hopefully set the stage for a little bit of wicking action here. So we'll try to keep everybody tuned in here with what I'm doing by trying to adjust the hole on this. As you can see, quite a bit of extra thin going in there. And it looked like I may have caught a little bit coming out the back end, which is good. Again, what I'm interested in is kind of helping to set the stage for this to wick its way in there using capillary action. And so see here where I'm going to set it up on where the piece here meets on the hole. Alright, and then so for the time being, this is going to have to sit on its side until this sets up for a little bit, and I will probably come back and add a little bit more, a bit at a time. I can't do the other side just yet because I want it set up on this side right here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on from there and do the other side on my own there, but just so we can kind of see what the finished product is afterwards. So, be back in just a second. Alright, last time, a second ago in the video, you saw putting some of that sprue goo on here, and as you can see, this has been built up quite a bit more since then. And again, it's not a lot yet, but I just kind of want to show some of the process here behind that. And also, by the way, this is not finalized up here, because as you can see from this profile template right there, that's going to be right at about here. There definitely needs to be a lot more of a bulbous area here, and we don't currently have enough material on there, as you can see. So we still will be adding more material here to fatten this up down here, which is going to then lead to it being much thinner right here. But I kind of wanted to demonstrate here how I'm going about putting some of these pieces on, because now it's starting to make more sense to use sheets, and when they've got to follow a curve like this, we have to use thinner sheets rather than the real thick, heavy-duty 1mm or 2mm thick stuff. So this right here is just going to be a series of laminated sheets to build it up, and I understand there's probably a little bit too much material on here already for the correct height, but that's fine. I want to at least get enough on there so I have something to work with when I start removing material. So as far as getting these set down properly, it's a lot easier to actually bend these prior to putting them on, rather than gluing them on one side and bending them over, because that usually will result in the bond of cement and plastic being broken. So what I've been doing is taking these, I don't know if you've seen one of these before, but this is a photo etch bending tool if you need curves, and it comes in a nice set by the small shop. Just various sized wooden metal rods. You go in here and you can put your pieces of photo etch in there and then kind of roll it out so you can get the correct radius. But the rods are very nice, very hard, and make for excellent little pieces to begin the bends on this plastic. And if you think it's rough treatment for the plastic, you haven't seen anything yet, because at some point, just kind of through working with this, almost bend it over on itself. And if you work gradually with it, you can use various size cylinders. And just a couple of minutes per piece, you can usually start to get that diameter or radius that you need to sit this down on there, so you're not overly stressing any cement joints when you're putting this in place. So what I've been doing is working with this for about a minute. And also you might notice that it's kind of overbent, and I do that on purpose. Alright, so let's have a look. Now it looks like it's sitting down without me having to push at the edges. So then I'll take a lot of extra thin and absolutely just slop it on there. There's no reason to be overly stingy with the extra thin, but I mainly put it down right down the center. That is the focal point for this particular step in my process. Let it set up for 10-15 seconds, and then flip it over and put it in place. Now, at this point, we've only glued, oh, there we go, hitting the camera again, my bad, folks. But at this point, we've only put cement down on the center. After that sets up for maybe 10-15 minutes, I'm going to come back and get it on the sides, because as you can see, this isn't fully down already. There's a crack there. Same thing on this side. And in about 10-15 minutes, we can apply, again, not in a stingy way, a bunch of cement right to that, and it'll wick its way up in between these pieces of plastic. And then I can take a nice straight edge, and I can kind of push it down at the edges to help get that cement to hold the plastic. So, there we are. Alrighty. Be back in just a second after that sets up. Now that cement has had enough time to set up, I'll show you what I'm talking about here as far as putting more cement into this to get this edge to lay down. The thing with sprue goo is, well, we will be putting on the edge of this just to make sure we don't have any voids in all of the supplied plastic. It will not readily wick down into that as easy as this extra thin. So, put plenty on there. And then I just take a straight edge and hold it in place kind of release and kind of hear it. The bond will let up without the pressure on there. But what that does also, though, is kind of helps the tackiness. I'm kind of trying to get the cement to work on both surfaces of the plastic that we're trying to meld together. So after a while, as you can see, it starts to lay down without any trouble. And just kind of pressing in place in various spots until I no longer hear it pulling apart. And what you can do is also resort to even using some of the quick setting. It's a little bit of a hotter glue or hotter cement. It has a lot more, a lot quicker bond action with plastic than the regular extra thin. More right here. I got some stubborn plastic. Now it took me a minute to wrap my head around how I was going to get this to lay down flush with the curvature of the hull. And at one point I had thought about heating up the plastic. Some experiments with a Bic lighter, and it ended up in deforming plastic, so that was too much heat and too risky after I had all these parts cut out. I didn't want to waste the plastic, so just went with manually bending them to be able to put them in place. And for the most part, it's worked out. So what we'll probably end up doing here is when I get all of these layers built up, we will slather on a lot more extra thin or the quick setting, and then put a cover over this and some pretty heavy rubber bands to kind of hold that all in place. But I got to do the other side of this, but no reason. It's just a repeat of what I did on this side. So be back in a second here with the next steps. All right, I've got that third piece laid down, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more to go before we match the height of this right here. I'm not going to put anyone through it. It's just repetitive of building this up. I will make a total of 8 sections of this, and will allow us again to match the height of the pieces in front of it. Maybe not even. That would be nuts. Nope. Does need all 8. When I pushed them down into place, definitely needed all 8. And then additionally, probably off camera, I'm going to start bulking this up again right over here so that it matches the template, the profile. So definitely got to bulk this up, got to add the rest of this. And then eventually we'll just continue on here in the back. I don't know how much of that I'm actually going to film and present, because it's just going to be very repetitive and get old very quickly, wasting a lot of your time. But also in the meantime, one of the things I'm going to be doing is working on removing this detail. This has to come off for the Pontos details to go on there. So usually I just use a nice, I'm not sure what the number is on this X-Acto blade, but I use one with the bigger handle. It's a lot more comfortable. The blades themselves are much wider. I feel like I've got better control over taking this detail and stuff off when I have to do this. But very much like putting the additional plastic card on the hull, this is just going to be very repetitive for everyone to watch, so no sense in wasting time on it. But just to kind of show you exactly what the method is. Get it mostly removed, and then go back in with a sanding stick and get it perfectly flat. Previously, when I've done this before, smaller things, used to sand everything down rather than cut it off with one of the chisel blades, and it just took forever. So this is much faster. Remove most of it and then go back and sand it out. I'm not too even worried about the sanding marks here because there's a gigantic sheet of photo etch. It's going to go over here and along the sides, and the sanding marks or scratches right here will actually help the adhesion of that large photo etch plate. So that, and then this is the foredeck where the anchors go. Capstans back here, and then there's also the what am I thinking here? The aft hull deck, and they both need the detail removed. I'll probably do that off camera, but just again, this was just a brief demonstration of how I'm going to go about doing that. So I'll put this aside for right now, and I think we're good to wrap up this episode. I'm going to be out of town all of next week, and I wanted to get something out before I went out of town. So until next time, stay safe, happy modeling. If you have any hints, tips, suggestions, feedback, I'm doing it wrong, you like how I'm doing it, please leave that feedback for me below so I can work on getting better. Thank you again.